If you found this video, then more than likely you're in the process of purchasing a home. And you're probably finding out that it's a bit more challenging than you had thought. The great news is that I can teach you the principles that the buyers who are winning houses are using that the buyers who are less successful aren't using. Spend the next few minutes with me and I'll make you a real estate expert. Just like positioning yourself as a seller, the buyer's objective should be to position themselves as the obvious choice in the eyes of the sellers. Now, I'm going to teach you 3 principles that will help you do exactly that. Principle number 1 is to have buying power in your price range. Now, here's what I mean by that. In an extremely competitive buyer market, it is very common for homes to sell above their asking price. Now, what that means is that imagine that your max price range that you're qualified to buy at is $200,000. Well, if you're shopping for homes that are listed for $200,000, then you would be at a competitive disadvantage against any other buyer who was qualified for more. I know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that. So what is that buyer doing to win that the unsuccessful buyers aren't? That buyer is shopping below their max price range. So it's as simple as this. If your max price range is $200,000, shop $180,000. Shop $160,000, $190,000. That way, you are the buyer that has the most buying power, and you are the buyer that's able to go a little bit over the asking price and potentially win in a multiple offer scenario. Tip number 2 is to know the 2 things that most sellers consider the most besides the price. Now, believe it or not, sellers and buyers are actually a lot more alike than they are different. And generally speaking, they want the same thing, a smooth and easy transaction that is fair and reasonable for them. Now, with that being said, there are 2 things that I have noticed that the sellers tend to lean on when making a choice of what offer to pick after they know they have a great price. And that is, which offer has the easiest route to the closing table and which offer has the highest levels of certainty. So let's break that down a little bit. The reason that sellers have a tendency to favor cash deals over deals that are contingent to financing is because a cash deal doesn't have any underwriting. A cash deal usually doesn't have an appraisal. Cash deals aren't subject to guidelines that are required from lenders. In other words, there are few or no headwinds. There is an extremely easy route to the closing table. Furthermore, there are some loan products that are just simply easier than other loan products. For example, a conventional mortgage in comparison to an FHA mortgage, a conventional mortgage is just easier. It's not that the sellers don't like FHA buyers or that the agents are telling the sellers that FHA buyers are bad. It's just that those loans have additional underwriting and additional guidelines that reduce the level of certainty. That's all. Next are the contingencies. Contingency is just a fancy word for if. The amount of contingencies that are included in your offer is the main thing that impacts the level of certainty to the seller. The more contingencies that you include in your offer, the less certainty your offer has. Every condition or contingency that must be met is a hurdle that must be overcome from the perspective of the seller. Now, I'm not telling you to remove all of your contingencies. All I'm saying is that the more contingencies you have, the less likely the seller is to select your offer. And that the buyers who are winning tend to have the least amount of contingencies. Tip number 3 is to be as capital intensive as possible. Now, obviously, this is easier said than done, but generally speaking, the buyers who are more capital intensive or have more cash on hand are going to have an advantage over the buyers who are a little bit tight in this regard. If you don't have to ask the seller to contribute to your closing costs, or maybe you want to add an appraisal gap guarantee, or I even had a buyer offer to pay a couple $1,000s of my seller's closing costs. These capital intensive buyers have a tendency to stand out to the sellers and to make the seller feel a lot more comfortable. These principles are things that I have seen consistently in the hyper competitive buyer market of the last few years. And every buyer's experience is slightly different, but I promise you that if you use these principles and these concepts, the likelihood of you winning in a multiple offer scenario will go up exponentially. If you like this video and got value from this content, then please like and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.